Hi there. If you're preparing for the IELTS speaking test and you're feeling a bit nervous or unsure, you are not alone. Today, I want to share something very helpful with you: the 5 most common mistakes that students make during the IELTS speaking test, and more importantly, how you can avoid those mistakes by using my simple and powerful speaking success system. Promise, this can make a big difference in your confidence and your score. So let's dive in. First, let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Brittany, and this is the Brittany Speaking Academy. Welcome! If you're new here, I help English learners like you feel more confident and speak more naturally, especially when it comes to exams like IELTS. And yes, I'm super excited today. Well, let's be honest, I'm always excited when it comes to helping students succeed, but today I'm extra excited. Why? 'Cause more and more students who are part of my IELTS Speaking Gold course are getting amazing results. They're reaching the scores they need, and many are even going beyond what they expected. It's such a great feeling to watch that happen. And you know what I think is one of the biggest reasons for their success? Of course, the breakout rooms where they get to speak with other learners from around the world really help. That kind of real-time practice builds confidence fast. But there's something else that's at the heart of their progress, and that's the speaking success system. This is the exact system we use throughout the course. Simple, it's clear, and most importantly, it works. I designed it especially for students who are currently at Band 5 or Band 6 and want to reach a higher score, Band 7 or even higher. Now, I've used this system to help tens of thousands of students all over the world. These are students just like you who were once worried about speaking English under pressure, who doubted themselves, who weren't sure if they were ready. But once they started using this 4-step system, they began to see real progress. They started feeling more in control during the test, more confident in their answers, and more natural when speaking English. In the rest of this video, I'll explain what the system looks like step by step and how you can start using it right now, even if you're still learning, even if you're not sure about your grammar, even if you get nervous speaking in front of other people. This system is designed for real learners who want real progress, not perfection. 'Cause the truth is, you don't need to be perfect to get a great IELTS score. You just need the right strategy, the right mindset, and the right kind of practice. So stay with me, because what you're about to learn could change your whole approach to IELTS speaking and help you finally reach the score you need to move forward with your goals, whether that's studying abroad, getting a better job, or starting a new life in another country. Let's get started. Right now, there are more than 3 million amazing people subscribed to my YouTube channel, and honestly, that still blows my mind. Over the years, after helping so many students prepare for the IELTS speaking test, I've learned exactly what it takes to get a good score. I've seen what works and what doesn't, and I'm here to share that with you. But more than just the technical stuff, here's what I really love: motivating you. Yes, you. I love encouraging learners like you to keep going, to stay confident, and to believe that fluency and success are possible, because they are. Whether you're aiming for Band 6.5, 7.0, or even higher, I want to help you get there. And guess what? You absolutely can. One of the biggest lessons I've learned from all this experience is something simple, but so important. It's this: when you have the right system and the right support, you can succeed. Really, anyone can. It doesn't matter where you're starting from or how long you've been learning English. What matters is that you have a clear plan, a good strategy, and the motivation to stick with it. The sad part is, so many students give up too soon. They stop trying because they feel stuck or frustrated. Maybe they've been studying alone with no real guidance. Maybe they've practiced and practiced but still don't see results. It's easy to feel lost when you're trying to do everything on your own. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can do this differently. You can study smarter, not just harder. So here's what we're going to do today. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 most common mistakes that IELTS speaking students make, and how you can avoid them. Then I'll introduce you to the 4-step method that's at the heart of my speaking success system. This is the system that so many of my students have used to go from Band 5 or 6 to Band 7 and beyond. And we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to do a bit of practice together too, so you can feel how it works and start using it right away. Plus, I've created a free PDF of this lesson that you can download and keep. You'll find the link down below, so don't forget to grab that after the video. Sound good? Great, let's dive in. Okay, let's talk about mistake number 1. This is a really common one, and it might surprise you. The first big mistake students make is writing and then reading their answers out loud as practice. Now, I know this might seem like a good idea. You get a question, you write down your answer, and then you read it over and over again. A lot of teachers even encourage this. But let me tell you, this is not an effective way to prepare for the IELTS speaking test. Why? 'Cause it's not how real conversation works. In the test, you won't have time to write everything out first. You won't be reading from a script. You'll need to speak naturally, to think and respond in the moment. Reading something you wrote earlier might help you memorize a few words or sentences, but it doesn't build the skills you actually need, like fluency, spontaneity, and confidence when speaking. In a real conversation, especially in the IELTS speaking test, the examiner wants to see how well you can speak off the top of your head. So, if you're practicing by just writing and reading, you're missing out on the chance to develop those real speaking muscles. Don't worry though, I'll show you what to do instead using my speaking success system. Are you ready to keep going and learn how to fix this and the other 4 big mistakes? Let's do this together. Now let's be real, when you're in the actual IELTS speaking test, you can't just pause everything and say, "Excuse me, mister. Examiner, give me a moment, let me write this down real quick. Okay, now I'm ready." That's just not how it works. And the same goes for real life. Imagine you're at a job interview or just having a conversation. "Hi. Nice to meet you. Where am I from? Hold on, let me write my answer first." It doesn't make sense, right? Of course, it's totally okay to jot down a few quick notes if you're practicing, maybe a word, an idea, or a phrase you want to use. That's fine. But writing out your full answer word for word and then reading it over and over again? That's not going to help you in the real test. Why? Because in the IELTS speaking test, there's nothing to read from. No paper, no script, just you and your voice. Everything has to come from your head in real time. And here's what happens when you rely too much on written answers. You memorize what you want to say, but when you try to speak it during the test, you freeze. You forget a word, or you panic because it doesn't come out exactly how you wrote it. Your answer sounds unnatural, rehearsed, even robotic, and that's not going to get you a high score. Examiners can tell when something has been memorized. So what's the better way to practice? Practice speaking. Actually speak. Out loud. Train your brain to respond in the moment. That's how real conversation works, and that's what the IELTS test is really measuring. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a really simple but powerful technique you can use to practice this at home. It's part of my speaking success system, and my students love it. But before that, this brings us perfectly to mistake number 2. Mistake number 2 is closely related to the first one, and it's this: thinking you should memorize your answers to every possible IELTS question. I get why students do this. Feels safer, right? You think, if I just prepare an answer for every question that might come up, then I won't get stuck. I'll feel confident. But here's the problem. There are so many different questions the examiner could ask. You'd have to memorize hundreds of full answers, and even then, the exact question might be different from what you prepared. And again, just like before, memorized answers don't sound natural. They don't show your real language ability. And most importantly, examiners are trained to spot this. If your answer sounds too rehearsed, they'll know, and they may lower your score. So instead of memorizing, I want you to train for flexibility. That means learning how to build strong answers using real examples, natural vocabulary, and smart strategies that help you think on your feet. That's what the speaking success system is all about. You don't need to know every possible question. You just need to know how to handle any question that comes your way. And guess what? That's a skill you can build step by step. One of the biggest mistakes IELTS students make is trying to memorize full answers to as many questions as possible. And look, I get it. Feels safe. It feels like if you can just prepare the perfect answer for every possible question, then you'll be ready, right? But here's the truth. There are just too many questions. The IELTS examiners have a massive question bank, and they're always changing the topic slightly. So it's basically impossible to prepare and memorize full answers for all of them. And even if you somehow manage to memorize 100 or 200 answers, you'd probably still get a question that's just a little different, and that tiny difference could throw you off completely. And here's what happens when that goes wrong. You walk into the test room. You're already nervous. You sit down and the examiner asks you a question. You start to say your memorized answer, but suddenly you forget a part of it. Or maybe the question was slightly different than what you practiced. And then your mind goes blank. You panic. You get tongue-tied. You start second-guessing yourself. That beautiful, polished answer you worked so hard to memorize? It's gone. And you crash. Now, I totally understand why students do this. Memorizing gives you a sense of control. You feel like you're doing something productive. You've created this carefully written answer with advanced vocabulary and perfect grammar, and it feels like it should get you a band 9. But the IELTS speaking test isn't about reciting a written script. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing how well you can communicate naturally in real time. The real skill you need isn't memorization, it's flexibility. You need to be able to listen to a question, think for a second, and respond confidently, even if you don't know exactly what to say at first. That's the kind of skill that gets you a higher band score. And that's something you can absolutely train for. I think one of the reasons so many students memorize is because of how we were taught in school. In a lot of countries, especially in large classrooms, teachers don't have time to help every student speak. So they fall back on what they know: rote learning, memorization. It's what they were taught and it's what they pass on. And yes, it works for passing written tests. But it doesn't help much when you need to speak. One of my students commented on a YouTube video and said something that really stuck with me. They wrote, "I've learned English by rote since I was a high school student. I struggle to speak well. I write down vocabulary every day, but I don't know how to use it in a sentence." And wow, so many learners feel exactly the same. You're doing all the right things but still can't speak comfortably. So what should you do instead? Don't memorize full answers. Instead, focus on learning and practicing chunks of language, little phrases and expressions that you can use in lots of different situations. For example, grammar chunks like I should have, I could have, I'd love to, or common expressions like it depends on the situation or I'm not really into that, but these are small, flexible tools you can mix and match in your answers. That's what fluent speakers do. You can also learn vocabulary chunks, groups of 2 or 3 words that naturally go together like strong opinion, face a challenge, or play a key role. When you practice using chunks instead of memorizing full sentences, your answers will sound more natural and you'll feel more confident because you're not trying to recall a whole script, you're just putting together pieces you already know. So remember, the goal isn't to sound perfect. The goal is to communicate clearly, confidently, and naturally. And you don't need to memorize 100 answers to do that. You just need the right strategy and a bit of smart practice. Now let's talk about something really important when it comes to improving your IELTS speaking score, and that's learning to think on your feet. When you're in the speaking test, you won't have a script in front of you. You won't be able to pause the exam, grab a notebook, and check your notes. You'll need to listen to the question, take a breath, and speak as naturally as you can. And that's why focusing too much on memorization is a mistake. One of the biggest myths in IELTS preparation is this idea that if you memorize enough answers, you'll be ready for anything. But memorizing full answers for every possible question is not just unrealistic, it's also dangerous. Why? Because there are so many possible questions you could get in the speaking test. You could never prepare for all of them, and trying to do that can actually hurt your confidence. What happens if you memorize a perfect answer and then you get a slightly different question? You panic. You freeze. You try to adjust the answer you memorized, but it doesn't quite fit, and then your fluency breaks down. I've seen this happen to so many students. They walk into the test with rehearsed answers in their head, and the moment things don't go as expected, everything falls apart. That's why memorization might feel like a safety net, but it actually holds you back. You spend more time trying to remember a perfect sentence than actually responding naturally and confidently in the moment. Now I get it. I really do. Memorizing answers feels safe. Gives you a sense of control. You've worked hard to craft a beautiful, grammatically correct response, maybe even with some impressive vocabulary, and you want to use it. But IELTS speaking isn't about writing. It's about speaking. And speaking well means being flexible. It means listening carefully, organizing your thoughts quickly, and using the language you already know to answer clearly, even if your answer isn't perfect. And there's another reason why many students lean on memorization. It's because of how we were taught in school. For years, maybe even your whole life, you were taught that the best way to learn something is to memorize it. That's how most traditional classrooms work. Teachers ask you to repeat words, memorize texts, and study for tests by remembering long lists of information. And often they do this because they were taught the same way, or because they're working with large groups of students and don't have time for individualized speaking practice. But language learning has changed. These days, we know that to truly speak a language, you need to do more than memorize, you need to practice. You need to get comfortable using the language in real situations, not just in your notebook. That's why it's much more effective to focus on learning chunks of language instead of entire answers. So what do I mean by chunks? I'm talking about short, useful phrases that you can mix and match in conversation. These could be grammar chunks like I should have, I would have, I could have, or vocabulary chunks like a once-in-a-lifetime experience or a big fan of. Even idioms and phrasal verbs count, like get the hang of it or look forward to. These phrases are like building blocks. When you learn them, you can use them in lots of different situations instead of relying on one memorized answer that might never fit the question you get. And when you focus on these small, flexible chunks, you'll build your confidence. You won't worry so much about saying things perfectly, you'll be focused on expressing your ideas clearly. That's what IELTS examiners are looking for. They want to see that you can speak naturally, that you can keep a conversation going, and that you can express your thoughts, even if you make a few small mistakes along the way. Now let's move on to another common mistake, and this one causes a lot of confusion. Mistake number 3, speaking too formally in the IELTS test. I see this all the time. Students think that because IELTS is a serious official test, they have to sound super formal, like they're giving a speech or writing a university essay. They try to avoid contractions like I'm or don't, and instead say I am or do not in every sentence. Some even avoid casual phrases like gonna, wanna, or you know, because they think the examiner will mark them down for being too relaxed. But here's the thing, that's not how real conversations work. And the IELTS speaking test is all about real, natural conversation. I remember reading a thread in a Facebook IELTS group where someone asked, "Can I use contractions like gonna and wanna in the speaking test?" And the responses were full of fear. People said, "No, never do that. You have to be formal." But that's completely wrong. In fact, speaking too formally can actually hurt your fluency. Can make you sound robotic and unnatural, like you're reading from a script instead of having a conversation. Let me be clear, the IELTS writing test requires formal English. Yes, but the speaking test? That's a different story. It's the same whether you're taking the academic or general module, and it's designed to reflect everyday spoken English. So, yes, you should use contractions. You can use relaxed, natural expressions. You can say gonna, wanna, cause, as long as you're using them appropriately and naturally. This shows the examiner that you're comfortable speaking English in real-world situations. That's exactly what they want to hear. Okay. Now let's talk about mistake number 4, another one I see all the time, learning long lists of vocabulary with no context. Some students are told, you need to learn 3,000 academic words for IELTS, and then they go and try to memorize every word on the list. They might even study these words in alphabetical order, apple, benefit, categorize, develop, and so on, without really understanding how to use them. Problem with this method is that when you memorize words without seeing them in context, you don't really learn how to use them. So when it's time to speak, you hesitate. You might use the word incorrectly, or you might forget it altogether. And instead of sounding confident and fluent, you start to second-guess yourself. Vocabulary is important, of course it is, but the way you learn it matters just as much as the words themselves. So instead of learning random words in isolation, try learning vocabulary by topic. For example, if you're preparing for questions about technology, focus on words and phrases related to that topic. Cutting edge, user-friendly, a breakthrough in innovation. I'm not very tech-savvy. When you learn vocabulary this way, it's easier to remember because you're connecting it to ideas and situations you understand. And even better, practice using those words in your answers. Don't just read them or write them down. Say them out loud. Use them in full sentences. Record yourself and listen back. This kind of active learning helps you build real fluency. You'll feel more confident and you'll be able to use those words naturally when it counts on test day. So let's take a moment and talk about something super practical. How to actually learn vocabulary in a way that sticks, because mistake number 4 was about memorizing random word lists, right? Let's look at what to do instead. Imagine you're preparing for IELTS and you want to improve your vocabulary on the topic of clothes. That's a good topic. It's common in everyday conversation and it often comes up in IELTS Part 1 or even Part 2. Now, instead of just writing down words like shirt, jacket, sneakers, or scarf in a long list, what if you organized your vocabulary by subtopics? Think about it. Clothes is a broad topic, but under that you have subtopics like clothes for work, fashion and style, shopping for clothes, seasonal clothing, and even cultural clothing traditions. Each of those subtopics has its own set of words and expressions. So if you're thinking about shopping for clothes, you might come across phrases like try on, fitting room, too tight, the right size, or even on sale. These are practical words you'll hear and use often, not just in a test, but in real life too. And when you learn vocabulary this way, by theme and by subtopic, you give your brain something to connect it to. This is actually how our brains love to store information. It's not just random access. Our brains are like a giant filing system, or maybe more like a computer with folders inside folders. You've got your clothes folder, then inside that a folder for shopping, and then inside that a few examples and real phrases you've actually seen or heard. That's how memory works best. One great way to support this is by using mind maps. Seriously, mind maps are magic for language learners. You start with one word or theme in the center, like clothes, and you draw branches for each subtopic: shopping, fashion, work, seasons, and so on. And off each branch, you add real words or phrases in context. Try on in the fitting room. Smart outfit for work. Trendy streetwear. The more specific and connected you make your vocabulary, the easier it becomes to remember and use. And don't just stop at writing these words down. Give them a home in your mind by putting them into sentences, or even better, by listening to them in real conversations. Maybe you hear someone say, I tried it on, but it didn't fit, or I'm really into vintage fashion lately. When you hear these phrases in real use, through podcasts, YouTube videos, movies, or stories, it gives you what we call context. And context is what helps you know not just what a word means, but also how and when to use it naturally. This is the big shift, moving away from memorize and hope to experience and connect. And when you study like this, you're not just studying for a test. You're building real language skills that will stay with you for life. Now, all of this brings us to mistake number 5, and this one's a bit deeper. Mistake number 5 is believing that learning English has to be painful. You've probably heard that phrase before, no pain, no gain, right? Especially if you've ever been to a gym or a fitness class. But a lot of English learners have been taught this same mindset, that if you're not suffering, you're not learning. That if you're not sitting at your desk for hours with grammar books and vocab lists, you're not doing enough. But guess what? That's just not true. I remember working with a group of business students once. On the first day of class, one of them said to me, "We don't mind suffering. We're ready. Even if we have to study for hours and hours every night, we'll do it." And I thought, wow, that's dedication, but it's also sad because language learning isn't meant to be miserable. In fact, the best kind of learning happens when you're enjoying yourself, when you're engaged, when you're curious, when you're laughing, making mistakes, having conversations, exploring new ideas, and expressing yourself. If you're constantly feeling stressed and exhausted by your study routine, you're not going to learn better, you're going to burn out. Your brain needs motivation and meaning to hold on to information. That's why the most successful students I've worked with, the ones who actually get Band 7, Band 8, even Band 9, are not necessarily the ones who study the most hours. They're the ones who learn with intention, who use smart strategies, who find ways to make the process enjoyable, even fun. So instead of sitting with a heavy grammar book every night, maybe you watch an English TV show with subtitles. Or you record yourself answering IELTS questions and listen back. Or you talk with a friend online about topics that matter to you. This is active learning. This is what actually moves you forward. And that's what my speaking success system is all about. It's not about cramming or memorizing or suffering through it. It's about practicing the real skills you need for the IELTS speaking test step by step in a way that builds confidence and fluency. We're going to talk more about that system in just a moment, but for now, just remember this: you don't have to suffer to succeed. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to memorize everything. What you need is the right strategy, the right tools, and a little bit of courage to keep going one step at a time. And when I heard those business students say they were ready to suffer, ready to sit down and memorize grammar for hours, I just smiled and thought, okay, but that's not really what you need. And I explained to them, just like I'm explaining to you now, it's not necessary to suffer in order to succeed. In fact, it might actually slow you down. And you know what they said? Really? They were surprised. But yes, really. We know this, right? Deep down, you probably know it too. When learning feels stressful, heavy, or frustrating, it doesn't help. It actually gets in the way. It makes it harder to focus, harder to remember things, harder to enjoy the process. And that stress, if you carry it with you into your studies or into your IELTS test, it can block you from showing what you really know. There's a really well-known theory from the researcher Stephen Krashen. It's called the affective filter. The idea is simple. When you're stressed, your brain puts up a kind of wall, a filter, and it actually prevents you from taking in new language. But when you're relaxed, curious, and enjoying the learning process, your brain is open. You take in more. You remember more. You actually learn better. So the truth is, the most powerful thing you can do is enjoy your learning. And I know that might sound simple, but it's not always easy, because many of us were raised to believe that studying has to be serious, boring, even painful. But enjoying your learning is a choice. Just like happiness. You know how people sometimes think happiness depends on the weather or how their day is going. But actually, happiness is something we choose every day. And learning can be the same. Of course, having good materials helps. A great teacher helps. A supportive community helps. But ultimately, you get to choose how you experience your studies. You can make them joyful. You can make them interesting. You can even make them fun. So instead of that old idea, no pain, no gain, how about this? Enjoy your learning and you'll gain even more. Now, maybe as you've been listening to this video, you've started to recognize yourself in some of these common mistakes. And if you do, hey, it's okay. No worries at all. Every learner makes mistakes. The important thing is that now you know what to watch out for. Now you're aware. That's the first step. So let's just quickly review what we talked about. You now know that writing and reading your answers doesn't help your speaking, it just makes your responses sound unnatural. Instead, you should practice speaking aloud, getting comfortable thinking on your feet the way you'll need to do in the real test. You've seen how memorizing full answers doesn't work. It's too easy to forget under pressure, and it doesn't help you sound fluent or confident. But memorizing small, flexible chunks of language, those are powerful tools you can actually use when speaking. You've learned that IELTS speaking is conversational English, not formal English. So yes, it's absolutely okay to say gonna, wanna, and cause in your speaking test. That's what real conversation sounds like. You also know now that learning long lists of vocabulary words isn't the best approach. You want to learn vocabulary by topic and context so your brain can organize and recall it more naturally when you speak. And finally, you know that learning doesn't have to be painful. It shouldn't be. In fact, when you enjoy the process, your learning goes deeper, faster, and lasts longer. So, are you making some of these mistakes? Totally fine if you are. You're not alone. What matters is what you do next. 'Cause now you have a better way forward. In the next part of this video, I'm going to walk you through my speaking success system, the exact 4-step method that students use in my course to go from band 5 or 6 to band 7 or even 8. It's clear, it's practical, and most importantly, it works. Plus, we're going to practice some of the steps together so you can really feel how it works. And remember, I've also created a free PDF of this lesson that you can download. Just click the link down in the description and grab your copy. It's yours to keep. Sound good? Okay, let's keep going and let's start building your speaking confidence today. Okay, so you're asking me, right, Key? So if I don't write the answer, I don't memorize it, I don't recite the answer, how do I practice? Okay, good question. Students who've got a band 7 or above are usually doing something different. They're studying in a different way. They know that writing, memorizing, and reciting has limited success for speaking, right? Doesn't give you the fluency and the flexibility you need to get a band 7 or 8. It's not just about knowledge. It's about fluency and flexibility. So how do you build that up? Well, those students are doing something different, and now you can do that too. I must say, right, there are different ways to study. This is not the only way to study. There are different ways you can do it. But I want to share with you the way that I teach and the way that I show students in my goal course how to study with the speaking success system to help them get the results they want, be it a band 7 or a band 8. It's a system I've built up over the years that builds up your fluency and flexibility. Okay, here it is, step by step, the 4 steps of the speaking success system. Okay, there are 4 steps. Number 1, try. Number 2, discover. Number 3, practice. Number 4, build. Number 1, try. This is where you take a question on IELTS speaking that might appear on the exam and try to give a spontaneous answer. Spontaneous means not prepared. So, maybe I ask you, do you often use social media? And you speak out your answer. And you might say, yes, I use Facebook. And then you can discover where the gaps are, where your weaknesses are. Maybe you don't know the vocabulary to talk about social media. How do you say that? And you need to discover, to scroll, right? By trying to answer spontaneously, you can discover the gaps and then you can start to study. Number 2, discover. Discover is where you watch or listen to a proficient or a native speaker answering the same question. And by listening to the answer, you can discover the natural spoken English you need to answer this question. And also, it's great because you discover the language or the vocabulary and context, you discover the chunks, you discover how the grammar may change the vocabulary, and you can make a note of this new language or the language you want to learn. The goal is not to memorize the answer. The goal is to memorize the chunks, the little phrases, or the collocations that can help you later create a better answer. Okay, I'll tell you more about chunks in a future video coming soon. Number 3, practice. In the practice step, you practice repeating those chunks that you've learned. But not just repeating, you practice using them in different ways. Maybe changing some words, using synonyms, antonyms, changing the tense, substitution. You can even use mind maps to help you do that. But you're practicing the chunks and then you go back to the original question and you answer it again. But try to use something new that you've just learned to improve your answer a bit. Step by step, this helps you build up your vocabulary and improve your answers. Then step 4 is build. And this is the step most students forget and never do. And this is where you build the flexibility and the fluency that you really need for Band 7 and Band 8. What you do is you go back to that original question and you answer it in a different way, and then again in another different way, and then again in a different way. So instead of memorizing one answer and repeating it the same way every single time, which, let's be honest, just makes you feel stuck, you start answering a little bit differently each time. And I don't mean completely different answers, right? Just small changes. Maybe you switch out one phrase. Maybe you try a new expression. Maybe you say the same idea in a new way. And what you're doing, without even realizing it, is building your flexibility. And that flexibility, that's gold. 'Cause it gives you confidence. You're not relying on memory. You're relying on you, on your actual speaking skills. So when you get a surprise question in the test, you won't panic. You'll be ready to handle it because you've trained your brain to think and respond naturally like a real conversation. And the best part? This process doesn't just happen once. You repeat it again and again, but each time with different questions, different topics, different challenges. That's the foundation of my IELTS Speaking Gold course. This is how we practice every single week. Real questions, real conversations, real growth. Now, is it an overnight success story? No. I'm not here to sell you a magic pill. But it is effective. And it is fun. It's engaging. You'll actually enjoy it. And over time, maybe in 1 month, maybe 2, or maybe 3, depending on your starting point, you'll begin to see the transformation in your speaking. Bit by bit, your skills will grow. Your confidence will grow. And your results will follow. And here's the thing, most students don't know about this kind of study system. They've never been shown it. No one ever explained how to learn speaking this way. But now you do. Now you know what's possible. So there it is, my speaking success system. Simple but powerful. Let me break it down one more time for you. Step 1 is try. You answer a question even if it's not perfect. You just try. Step 2 is discover. You reflect, listen, compare, and discover better ways to express yourself. Step 3 is practice. You repeat and improve. You speak again, building your fluency and confidence. Step 4 is build. You grow your skills with more topics, more questions, and more real-life speaking. And here's the truth. Anyone who uses this system can succeed. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to follow the steps, be consistent, and stay motivated. I've seen it happen for thousands of students, and it can happen for you too. So go for it. Go succeed, my friend. You have everything you need to start. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Have a look at what some of my students are saying. People who've used this method stuck with it and are now getting band 7s, 8s, and even higher. Their stories are real and they're so inspiring. Now maybe you're thinking, okay, I understand the idea, the theory. I get how this could work. But maybe you're still wondering, What does it actually look like in action? That's a great question. And that's exactly what we'll explore in next week's video. I'm going to walk you through real examples, real students using the system. You'll see how it works. You'll feel it. And you'll know exactly how to apply it to your own learning. Until then, keep going, keep practicing, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. You've got this. Thank you so much for watching. Do remember to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see future videos like next week's video. And that's it.